You're listening to the best of American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
News of the day.
Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
With values that never die.
There are certainly a lot of controversies or scandals brewing right now when it comes to the Obama administration.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly.
The stories that matter.
This is a massive escalation in the tension here in Egypt.
The issues that count.
I don't know why the media tries to make this into a sensation. We have never hidden the fact that we supply Syria with weapons.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
He's got the red, white, blue flying high on the farm. Semper Fi tattooed on his left arm. Spend a little more in the store for a tag. In the back it says USA.
Welcome to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I am the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. And every week, you know I do my best to uphold values that will never, ever die. This week, it is my distinct honor and pleasure to welcome to our broadcast Senator Rick Santorum. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you, Dr. Grace. Good to be with you.
It's great to be with you. He is one of the Republican presidential candidates, a former senator from Pennsylvania. How are you faring out there in the campaign trail? Are you totally beat or energized?
Oh, I love being out there and engaging and trying to save the country. I mean, we're trying to go out there and paint a vision and trying to rally people to. As my campaign song, which was written by a country music artist, Take Back America. I mean, I think it's really time that we stand up for the values that made our country great and full-throatedly articulate those and try to rally Americans around a very different vision for the future of our country.
Right. Now, before we get rolling with my line of questioning, I want to just lay out a disclosure out there for the audience. My sister, Loredana, has previously worked for the senator, although that does not impinge on this report in any way or my opinion. And, Senator, the reason I reached out to your campaign was I was watching that first Fox News debate, and at the end of it, I thought, wow, Senator Santorum won that. He was leagues above every single other candidate. And to my shock, Senator, the media subsequently was saying that Carly Fiorina won and the spotlight did not shine upon you. Why do you think that is?
One of the things I learned a long time ago is that the media has its own little agenda that they want to pursue, and they have people that you can just see that they're going to get behind and give them a chance. And you know what? We went through that last time. I saw it over and over again in the presidential race. And you know what? We found out that the media ultimately, well, they have an impact, doesn't have the final say. The voters do. And I was able to get out and, again, stand on principle, stand on conviction, on a clear and positive message for the country, talk about my record of leadership and accomplishing things. And went to the people of Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, the early states, and then 10 other states that we won, all without a whole lot of media attention. So can't worry too much about that. You just got to focus on how you win a race, and you do that by talking to voters and getting them on your team.
Right. Well, for me, it was a bit of a surreal moment because what I saw, and then the subsequent reporting, to me, it was all skewered. What I saw that night, Senator, you won that debate. You were in command of the issues. You have honed your skills since the last time, and you were commanding, you were presidential, you were articulate. What I found impressive was you did lay out what you have achieved. So you have, some of the other senators in the race, like, say, Senator Ted Cruz or Rand Paul or Jr., they don't have a long record of achievement. You're a senator in this race, and you laid out all the legislation that you have put forward in your many years in the Senate. And I thought it was a very impressive record that you're running on.
Well, thank you. I'm someone who went to Washington, D.C., like a lot of the senators who are actually in the race right now. I was young. I was 36 years old when I first went to Washington, and I shook things up. When I went to the Senate, I was 32 when I went to the House, and as part of a gang, not the gang of eight that tried to sell us down the road on some of the immigration issues, but in fact the gang of seven that actually caused the defeat of the Democratic Speaker of the House, put the Ways and Means Committee chairman in jail for fraudulent activities that we uncovered. I mean, we were pretty serious down there and shaking up both political parties. And then you mentioned a whole long record of reforms and accomplishments to limit the size of government and create more freedom and opportunity. And I'm very proud to run on that record, and I think it very much contrasts with some of the younger guys who are running out of the Senate who have a record of pointing the finger and yelling no, but don't have a long record of accomplishment.
Yeah, and I thought you certainly distinguished yourself by pointing that out. And the line that won me completely was when you talked about immigration and you said that America is distinguished because the compassion is in our laws. Yeah, that was brilliant. Right. And your story about your father and grandfather moved me to tears. But I want to ask you this. You said that you have the toughest immigration plan out there. What is your immigration plan?
Well, when I say it's tough, it's actually not tough. It's actually very compassionate for the people in this country who have played by the rules and are seeing a country that is not producing the jobs or the wages and the benefits that really is the promise of America. In part because we have been flooding our labor markets with both legal and illegal immigrants now for the past 25 years, and we have the highest percentage of immigrants living in this country than we have in 105 years. And now that can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing, but when you see wages have increased up $1, wages for production workers, for people who are wage earners salaries, wages have increased by $1 in 25 years. So, I mean, we're talking about 4 cents a year is what we're seeing as far as increase in the wages, in real wages. That's just, and during that 25-year period, again, we brought in 35 million legal and illegal immigrants, the largest in the history of our country. And what I've said is, I'm not against immigration. When I was in the House in my early days in the Senate, I was actually an advocate for more immigration. I thought it was going to be a good thing. And I think the bottom line is we have to look back and say, has it helped? And I think we have to say, well, it's maybe some, but it certainly has caused a real problem for lower-income workers in America, and that we need to recalibrate. And so what I've suggested is we need to first do a 25% reduction of legal immigration. Mm-hmm. We bring in 1,050,000 a year, the highest level ever in the history of our country. And what I've suggested is let's get back to the highest previous level, which was 750,000, and that was during the late 1800s and early 1900s. So we're going to still be at the second highest rate of immigration, even after my proposal is implemented. And then secondly, we have to do something about illegal immigration. 700,000 people came to this country last year illegally, either by overstaying their visa or by crossing the southern border and coming into this country. That is the highest level now, I think, since the Obama administration started. And it's because we're providing all of this incentive for people to come. And so we need to secure our borders. We need to send people who are overstaying their visas home. And we also need to tell people businesses that are hiring people that they have to verify that their employee is in fact legally able to work here.
Right. Now, when you say secure our borders, do you support building a wall across the border?
I don't think anyone's really suggesting building a wall across the entire border. I don't think that would necessarily be a wise thing to do, a wise expenditure of money. But certainly there is a lot more border walls and border fences that need to be constructed in conjunction with additional personnel at the border, additional sensors, surveillance, drones, etc., to be able to detect movements along the border. And very importantly, we have to start demanding help from the Mexican government. The Mexican government has been complicit in the chaos that is at the border. They've been complicit in allowing people to come through their country from from Central and South America, and then to move into America. They are a big reason why the border is not in control right now. And I think we have to do more. And I've said in my speech today, which I gave at the National Press Club, that we have to, tell Mexico, we want to engage with you. We want to work with you on border stability. But if you're not willing to do that, then we have to start taking measures to make it hurt for Mexico. And one of the things I suggested is not renewing border crossing cards, maybe putting some other types of fees on wires that come back go from the United States to Mexico, things like that could really hit Mexico hard. They're very much enjoying a lot of money coming from America into Mexico because of illegal immigrants, and we have to make a counterbalance.
Yes, that makes sense. Now, what about, you said that you want to crack down on those who are overstaying their visas and those who are here illegally. What will you do specifically to achieve those goals?
Well, one is E-Verify. I mean, E-Verify is a system that is a very reliable system. Most business people who do use it right now find it to be incredibly reliable and very simple to use. It's a system that identifies whether the worker in your employ is in fact legally here or they're using a false ID. And so anyone that we will require E-Verify for existing employees as well as future employees to weed out people who shouldn't be working in
right,
this
and let's
country.
say one is caught that is illegal. What do you do with that individual?
What I've suggested is that we have to move forward with removals, and that I'm not suggesting that we have people raiding areas for looking, roving bands of ICE workers looking for illegal immigrants. But as we come across illegal immigrants, and whether through the E-Verify system or whether through police work, general police work, they will be put on a path for removal.
Okay, very good. What do you say to the current controversy raging about anchor babies? Do you believe that a child of an illegal immigrant should be an American citizen or not?
I want to make a distinction because I think there's some hyperbole going around. I don't think anyone who holds the position that I'm going to articulate is for saying that anyone who is currently a United States citizen who was given citizenship because they were born here in America under the existing interpretation is going to lose their citizenship. So I want to be very clear that any change in the issue of birthright citizenship is going to be prospective, not retroactive. You can't take someone's citizenship that they've already been granted. But you can, going forward, have a system that says that you have to be a legal permanent resident or someone who is an American citizen in order to qualify for birthplace citizenship. That the fact that you don't have illegal immigrants who come into this country. I think under the Constitution, it's very clear that Congress can limit citizenship to only people who have either of those other two statuses, and that includes not giving birthright citizenship to people who are here on a visitor visa. I mean, if you come in to tour America and you have a baby here, your baby shouldn't be given American citizenship simply because you're here on vacation.
Excellent, right. So essentially, you are going to get tough on this crisis that is currently basically transforming America. It is the greatest transformative element of our time.
Yeah, I would say not. I wouldn't say get tough. I would say get compassionate. I would say compassion for the people in this country who are suffering the consequences of a flood of workers that are undermining their ability to be able to provide for their families. I mean, people talk about family breakup. How about families that are breaking up because of economic stress and strife caused by lower wages and lack of opportunity for employment? We tend to look at it from the perspective of people and seeking compassion for people who have put themselves in this situation deliberately by breaking the law, and that we're supposed to feel compassion for them, which of course we are. I mean, we're supposed to feel compassion for everybody, but we forget about all the millions of Americans who are suffering as a result of that, and that's why I say I don't see this as getting tough at all. I see this as really looking out for what every American public policy decision should be about, and that is what is in the best interest of America.
Indeed. Now, Senator, you are obviously an individual who has stood very firm for your Christian convictions. You appeal to values voters. I am a value voter. I wear my Christianity on my sleeve, and I vote accordingly. It seems, though, that in this election, those values are being totally ignored. There's a lot of talk about the economy, a lot of talk about immigration, but where is the voice? Who represents right now? Who is the best candidate for those who care about advancing the Christian cause in this country? Especially Christianity Christians are constantly being persecuted. So what do you say to all that?
I would say that we need people who are going to promote the values that made our country great and not be afraid articulate the importance and the integral nature of the dignity of all human life and what that means to a society that values human life, and how it creates a much safer, much more wholesome, a more virtuous and prosperous society, one that values the marriage of a man and a woman to form families that become the foundation of which not just our society is built, but our economy is built. Those are things that are truths that we know are good, that we know are true, that we know are morally right, and we should not back away from them because there's a temporary period of time in America where people have found it to be too much of a restriction on their own personal freedom to live by those values and virtues.
Indeed. And what is your response to the Supreme Court decision on same-sex marriage?
I think it was an unconstitutional decision, and as such is one that the other branches of government have a responsibility to contest. And as president, I would do my best to move the American public in a direction to help me contest that decision. And I think by the time I'm president in January of 2017, I think we'll see a lot of evidence that this decision is doing real harm to religious liberty in America, to the family in America, and to children and their ability to be able to live to their potential.
Do you think we live in an age of Christian persecution?
Well, it certainly is true in many other areas around the world. There's no question that Christians are being persecuted in I don't know about record numbers, but certainly greatly in the Middle East, in particular, Africa and other places in Asia. And even here, you're beginning to see it. You're seeing evidence that Christianity and are now being told, Christians are now being told, Hillary Clinton is an example, that you just have to change your beliefs to conform to what the government believes is the right thing to do. That should be a warning flare to everybody, whether you're a believer or not. When the government can tell you have to conform to what the government is telling you to believe, we have lost the most fundamental of rights.
Very well said, Senator. Thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure talking with you. That was Senator Rick Santorum, Republican presidential candidate. We look forward to having you on our broadcast again someday, sir.
Thank you. And if you want to help, please go to ricksantorum.com and sign up to help us out if you can make a contribution. I always say if you're willing to make a contribution, I'm willing to accept it. So please help us out.
Well, good luck. So that's ricksantorum.com. Go to ricksantorum.com. He has a great website. It outlines all of the key issues that he holds dear. Check it out, ricksantorum.com. Thank you and good luck, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. That was our interview with Senator Rick Santorum, presidential hopeful, and an individual who the mainstream media, in my view, totally blackballed after that first debate. I thought he won it hands down. Great record, and certainly very appealing to values voters like Dr. Grace.
Tonight, fire beneath my feet is burning bright. The way that I've been holding on so tight, with nothing in between.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
You're listening to the best of American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I am the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. We have a guest today. It is Jennifer Burke. She is the co-founder of Politistic.com and its editor-in-chief. Welcome, Miss Burke.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now, you are an advocate for individual freedom, and you are outraged that a citizen journalist by the name of James O'Keefe is being harassed by the Obama administration. Can you tell us what's going on?
Yes, for those of your listeners who do not know, James O'Keefe has actually been the reason for a lot of powerful investigative videos. He's the reason that Acorn basically dismantled. They were at the heart of a lot of voter fraud. He exposed Planned Parenthood, who were aiding and abetting and sex trades and counseling people on how to get underage girls abortions.
Yeah, for those of you might remember, he posed as a pimp in that video. It went viral. Yeah. It was the talk of the town for quite a while. Go on, continue.
Exactly, and it put him on the map. And most recently, last summer, when we were having a crazy influx of illegals flooding the border, a lot of people argued that it's not just illegals we have to worry about, it was terrorists. So one of the things that James O'Keefe did was he dressed up as Osama bin Laden, and he crossed the southern border to show just how easy it was to cross it with no problem. And ever since he did that, he's been stopped by U.S. Customs at airports 6 times, I believe it is now. After the 4th time, he thought this is ridiculous, and when he was coming back into the country through Canada, he was stopped by U.S. Customs, and he recorded it. And it's really, really disturbing. He is being targeted because of this investigative journalism that is making the government look bad. That's showing just how unsafe the Obama administration is making this country.
Okay, now let me play devil's advocate for a second. So when he is stopped, what happens exactly? He's just asked a series of questions, and then he's allowed to enter the country, correct?
Well, it's not just so simple as a series of questions. When he was stopped in Canada, he was held for over an hour, and they even asked him things like, "So, what? Did you dress up as somebody and cross the border?" And they said, we're afraid you might be trying to smuggle something to show just how easy it is, and you'll make us look bad if we allow you to go through. And then 11 days later, when he was stopped again in Seattle, he actually saw a picture of the computer screen that basically said, and I don't have my computer in front of me, but it accused him of basically making things up to try to make the government look bad. It had his picture, it had his name. And so, he's being targeted just because of his investigative journalism.
Indeed. Now, what would you say to somebody who says, well, look, if he's done this in the past, they fear that he's going to do it again. He's going to embarrass them again. So they're caught now between a rock and a hard place. Every time this guy crosses the border, they're going to have to do that just to safeguard their own jobs. It's not harassment. It's just he's brought the spotlight on himself, and now they have to do it in order to protect their reputations. How do you answer that question?
You know what? If this was the first instance of the Obama administration targeting and harassing reporters, that would be one thing, and perhaps you can make that argument. But remember, just a few years ago, they tried to paint Fox News' James Rosen as a co-conspirator against the government for simply doing his job as a reporter. They not only tapped his phone, they tapped his parents' phones or tracked his parents' communication, and they also were tracking things inappropriately with AP reporters. So it's disturbing the lengths that the Obama administration is going to basically stifle freedom of speech. When we've seen him call out media outlets that he does not like, he tried to get Fox News kicked out of the White House press pool. Because he doesn't like the fact that they won't fall in line with his agenda, and that they'll actually criticize him and point out things that they think is not correct. So it's not simply, in my opinion, just doing their job. It is targeting him because they don't like what he's doing, and they've done it before. I mean, if a Republican president were doing the types of things that Obama is doing to squash free speech, I think that the liberal media would be singing a different tune.
Indeed. And what O'Keefe did when he crossed the border, disguised as Osama bin Laden, he exposed just how unsafe the border is,
Exactly.
how unsafe we are right now, essentially,
Right.
because our border is wide open. Even someone who looks like a sworn enemy, a known enemy, in fact, enemy number one of the United States, could cross over with impunity. And indeed, that is really embarrassing to the Obama administration. So you see this as pure retaliation for exposing the danger that this president puts American citizens in.
Exactly. And remember, even while we had illegals streaming across the border, thousands by the day, in the Obama administration were putting them in planes and dropping them off in various cities across the country, Obama had the audacity to claim that our border has never been more secure. Well, James O'Keefe proved that that's not true. And the unfortunate reality is our Border Patrol agents have gone from patrolling the border and trying to make sure, bad people don't get in, make sure that it's not crossed illegally, make sure that our nation is secure, to basically just being babysitters. I mean, at that time last summer, they were basically making sure that people crossed the border safely, that no one got hurt, and were relegated to just babysitting these illegals that were being housed in facilities. So James O'Keefe made them look bad. I mean, you can look at lots of variety of things with this administration. Look at the TSA, how many trials that they failed to show that these safeguards that are supposedly the government's claiming have put in place to secure this country really aren't doing a thing.
Indeed. So what is your understanding of why this is happening? Why is the administration so lax?
When last summer, I remember one of Obama's biggest allies, Luis Gutierrez from Chicago, went to the border of Texas and spoke in Spanish, and it was either Texas or California. No, it was Texas, and said that the land actually belonged to Mexico. This was stolen land that we were standing on, and that's the argument that some Democrats are making. I believe that they know that the larger percentage of illegals that come across that border are going to vote Democrat, and they want that voter base. They've abandoned the black. They used and abused the black vote for decades, and now they're done with them, and they're moving on to the next group. Illegal immigration will have a horrible effect on our country in many ways, but especially with the unemployment levels of the black community, which already has record unemployment under Barack Obama. And it's the voter base they want, and I've never understood in all of my adult life why we didn't have a national language. And the Democrats have worked so hard for so many decades to strip this country of any national identity, and this is just part of that.
Right. Very well said. Now, I founded an institute in 2005 called the Edmund Burke Institute for American Renewal. And the basis of that institute was to encourage African Americans and Hispanics and young people and women, encourage them to vote according to conservative values that many of them hold. And when you said earlier that African Americans have been basically used and abused by the Democratic Party, that's what I used to tell my students. I used to teach at Howard University, and I used to tell them, right now, you're not using your vote strategically because the Democrats believe that they have your vote locked up, and therefore they can ignore all your issues and concerns. And the Republicans, on the other hand, feel we're never going to get their vote, and therefore they ignore you too. And so essentially, the African American communities might say, they languish precisely because they're not using their vote strategically. So how did you come to your conservative values? How did you become a conservative?
I didn't really realize. I was kind of one of those apolitical people for a long time, and it was probably in my early 30s that I finally started waking up. And it was, the Democrats have worked slowly but surely, but starting in the mid 2000s, they just ramped it up. And it was really, for me, the big awakening was Barack Obama. And a lot of people listened to what he said, and they didn't really hear what he was saying. But I heard what he was saying when he talked about fundamental transformation of this country. And my first thought was, how do you want to fundamentally transform something that you supposedly claim to love? Something, how is the Constitution a flawed document, and it's something that you're going to raise your hand and put your other hand on the Bible and claim to defend and support it? And so Obama woke me up because I realized, I looked at what he believed in, how he voted, what his record was, what he did even as a civilian, as a community organizer, rabble-rouser, and that's what really got me involved. But when I would speak to my husband, Matthew, about, I was a teacher for 12 years, about how I ran my classroom, and he told me, he said, I knew you were a conservative. He just never said anything to me based upon how you told me you ran your classroom, because I didn't take any excuses. Didn't matter to me what color a kid was. It didn't matter what their family history was. It didn't matter what their home life was. I had the exact same high expectations for everybody, which is what liberals don't have. They have they have that soft bigotry of low expectations for blacks, and it's even now they're wanting to apply that to the criminal system and having some crime laws changed because more blacks commit them, and they say it's racist. Are you saying they can't help themselves? I think I think the message that the Democrats send to the black community is a horrible one, and I wish more people would open their eyes. They have successfully taken their racist history and led blacks to believe that it was actually the Republicans that supported slavery, that blocked the civil rights movement, and that had the Jim Crow laws. And it's a shame. I wish more people within the black community would understand fully who the Democrats truly are.
Now, you are a woman after my own heart, because as a professor, I was just as tough as I was just as hard on my students as you seem to be. And I had high expectations for them. And you know what? Most young people love it when you have high expectations for them because they want to be challenged. They want to be challenged.
Yes, I totally agree.
Now, tell me, when you speak to folks about your anti-Obama views, do you get a lot of hostility or do you get a good reception?
Well, like most black conservatives, it's interesting to me. Black conservatives are typically accused of being self-loathing, hating their own race, being Uncle Toms, all kind of things. But then you have people who have faked being black, like Rachel Dolezal and most recently Shaun King, and then you have these very same black people that attack black conservatives like me, saying, who are we to judge them? If they feel they're black, they're black. What a double standard that is. White liberals, they don't understand it. I do have a few friends. I remember I was featured in a Ebony magazine one year. They did a profile of some black conservative women, and one of my friends that I've known since she was in kindergarten wrote to me and said, who do I see when I open up my recent issue of Ebony magazine? My one black conservative friend. Sad to say that I'm her only black conservative friend. But not all of them are open-minded like that. It's usually, they usually go on the attack. It's interesting. Liberals claim that conservatives are closed-minded and racist, but it's really the liberals that are the ones that are closed-minded and racist with their assumption that I should look in the mirror and determine that I'm a Democrat because my skin is darker.
Exactly. And also, as though the color of your skin should determine almost every single thought in your head. It should determine your political allegiance. But no, guess what? Newsflash, Jennifer Burke has a soul and a mind and a brain, and she's a unique person that doesn't fall into any one category. And they're the ones that are trying, they always talk about the party of diversity, but they're the ones that want to put people in very narrow, rigid boxes. Right.
If you always look at the claims of the party of diversity, all you have to do is look at the Republican GOP, the Republican presidential candidates versus the Democrat presidential candidates, and you tell me which one is the party of real diversity.
Yeah, in terms of their belief system, yes, indeed, you are so right. There's a lot more diversity on the Republican stage at the last presidential debate. And now, in fact, the Democrats are preventing debate, right? You have Martin O'Malley, the former governor of Maryland, saying, we want more debates. And the Democrats, the so-called party of diversity and tolerance and open-mindedness, they don't want too many debates. No, let's just crown Hillary as quickly as we can.
Exactly.
That's obviously backfiring. Well, let me ask you one last question. What is Politistic and what brought about its foundation?
Well, Politistic, it's a news and an opinion website, conservative-based, and we make no bones about it. We say from the get-go we are biased to anyone and anything that supports the Constitution, the document upon which this country is supposed to be run. And I founded this along with my husband, Matthew Burke, and a friend of ours, Chris Hall, because we just felt there needed to be a different, hard-hitting voice out there, something that to counter the liberal narrative and the liberal spin. And there are always stories out there that are kind of buried under the radar a little bit that the media does not want you to know about. And we try to bring those stories to the forefront. And so we started the site in April of this year, and we've been very, very pleased with our growth since then. My husband and I actually attended the first Tea Party rally in Seattle, and have been very involved with the movement ever since then. So it's a blessing to be able to do this.
Awesome. Well done. And thank you for being with us today. That is Jennifer Burke, the co-founder of Politistic and the editor-in-chief. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
You're listening to the best of American Heartland.
News of the day.
Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
With values that never die.
There are certainly a lot of controversies or scandals brewing right now when it comes to the Obama administration.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly.
The stories that matter.
This is a massive escalation in the tension here in Egypt.
The issues that count.
I don't know why the media tries to make this into a sensation. We have never hidden the fact that we supply Syria with weapons.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
He's got the red, white, blue flying high on the farm. Semper Fi tattooed on his left arm. Spend a little more in the store for a tag.
Welcome to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I'm your host, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. Thank you so much for spending some of your afternoon with us. I am especially thrilled today. I wrote a column in World Tribune called Why Conservatives Should Take a Closer Look at Mike Huckabee. And I am honored to introduce the multi-term governor of Arkansas and former host of Huckabee, a very popular weekend political review show. Governor Huckabee, welcome to our broadcast.
Dr. Grace, it is a pleasure to be with you, and I was so very honored and thrilled by the column you wrote. I just hope that the rest of America is as smart and as insightful as you demonstrated yourself to be in that column. It was really terrific.
Thank you very much, Governor. You know what I'm hearing in the grassroots is people generally like you, they trust you, but they're saying to me, you know what, Dr. Grace, I don't think that Governor Huckabee is enough of a fighter. And right now we want a fighter, and that's why we like Cruz, and that's why we like Trump. What do you say to that, Governor Huckabee?
Well, I think people maybe don't know much about my history. When I got into politics 25 years ago, it was all a fight. I'm the only one that's fought the Clinton political machine and did it repeatedly, because every race I ever ran in Arkansas was against the machinery and apparatus that Bill and Hillary had put together in that state. It was an incredible uphill climb against the wind, because most people don't know. Arkansas was a more Democratic, partisan, hardcore blue state than Massachusetts, Vermont, Maine, Oregon, or California. It was the most lopsided in America, and I was only the fourth Republican elected in 150 years. So for people to say, well, I don't know if Huckabee can fight, then they have no idea the kind of battles I went through, not only to get elected, but then to effectively govern over the course of the 10 and a half years as governor and the course of 3 years as a lieutenant governor. It was a battle every single day I walked into that office.
Right. Now, what do you say to those who would say, well, look, if you look at the record, he's just another rhino, somebody that caved? How do you answer that?
Well, I know I cut taxes 100 times in a state that had never seen an income tax cut. I was able to eliminate not only capital gains taxes, but the marriage penalty. We made a lot of tax cuts that benefited families, that made it easier for mothers and fathers to raise their kids. We rebuilt the road system. We made our public schools accountable and brought test scores up in every grade. We transformed the healthcare system from a intervention-based model to one that was about prevention, lowering costs for the consumer, something that I wish Obamacare had done, but it failed and went the other way. And I fought corruption. Over the course of my first few years in office, we went after the people that were stealing the taxpayers blind, and about 17 different elected officials from the state and local level were indicted, convicted, and or sentenced saving the taxpayers billions of dollars over the course of time from the corruption that had so permeated the state of Arkansas and its one-party partisan politics.
And when people say, well, we want a fighter, and you've said, okay, I did fight them on so many issues, and I fought the Clinton political machine, what would you do if you're going up against Hillary Clinton? What are the weapons that you would use to fight her?
Well, first of all, truth is the best weapon we'll ever have. Truth is what would cause me to get on the stage with her and ask her why she looked Charles Woods, the father of Tyrone Woods, one of the four murdered in Benghazi, why she looked him in the eye in the presence of his son's casket and promised to get to the bottom of his death, and in fact never again spoke to Charles Woods. And I would ask, Mrs. Clinton, when that phone rang 4 times from your ambassador and he was begging for help, why didn't you assemble and ask the White House and the military to send every available resource to help those people survive the night? Why did we wait 7 hours and never lift a finger or move those F-16s out of Italy that could have been there in an hour and a half? I'd love to be able to ask her why, when the phone rang at 3 a.m. at her house, she let it go to voicemail. And there are many, many other questions I'd have for Mrs. Clinton. And again, nobody knows her quite like I do. And when I hear people say, we want a fighter, I want a fighter. I'm a fighter. But the difference is, I've often said, any drunken redneck can walk into a bar and start a fight. But what you want to know is, if you start one, can you finish it? Can you effectively lead and govern? Just to say we had a fight, and boy, it was a heck of a fight. The question is, what is the result of that fight? If it means that we improve and change and get our government operating under the Constitution, that's what we need to be fighting for, not just to go in and throw some punches and never get anything accomplished.
Right,
I've got a record of actually governing, Dr. Grace, and that's what I think people really should want in an executive.
Right. Nowadays, what you're seeing is a couple of senators who have a very thin resume, Rubio, Cruz, and Paul, in government. They have no executive experience. You have others that have no government experience whatsoever, like Trump and Carson and Fiorina. Can you explain to the folks, why does it matter? Because what I'm hearing from the grassroots is, look, maybe it's better to have somebody with no experience because the established folks, the experienced folks, are making a mess of this country. How do you answer that?
Well, I think it's a valid point that a lot of people are making. They're just so frustrated, and I can't blame them. And I don't want to say anything disparaging about any of my Republican colleagues in the race. We've got some good people that are going to be on that stage. But I believe that what I bring to the race is an extended tenure under very difficult circumstances as an executive actually governing. That's important. It's like having a pilot in the left seat of the airplane with some gray hair, 20,000 hours of flight time, who's flown through lots of thunderstorms. You want that guy in the cockpit when you're about to fly through bad weather a lot more than you want someone who just got out of flight school. The second thing, I've worked in the private sector. I've run my own businesses. I know what it's like to sign the front of the paycheck and to have to make payroll out of your own back pocket. And then I've worked in the nonprofit sector. So I understand that some things people do because they have to in the private sector. Some things they do because you've persuaded them that they want to in the nonprofit sector. And then some things in government are a combination where you can't order the legislature to do anything. But you have to learn how to lead, persuade, and get people to agree to help bring things to fruition that they may not have thought of themselves or even liked at the beginning. And that's the art of governing. And I just don't think we can have on-the-job training for the next president, somebody who has never been tested or tried in that executive role. I just think that would be a huge mistake. We've certainly seen what it is to have a untested freshman senator over the past 6.5 years. I cannot imagine why Republicans would think that'd be a good idea for us.
Right. Do you think, Governor, that Hillary Clinton should be investigated? Should a criminal investigation be launched to look into? Was there any wrongdoing between the work of the foundation and her role as Secretary of State? Do you think that raises flags that are so red that we should investigate from a criminal perspective?
Whether it's from a criminal perspective, that might be presumptuous, but we absolutely owe it to the taxpayers to investigate, and I believe that the former Secretary of State, should absolutely cooperate with Congressman Trey Gowdy's committee. She shouldn't be able to stonewall. She should not only answer the questions. We need to know, why did you erase those 33,000 emails? Why did you have your own private server? Why did you not follow the government protocol when you knew what that protocol was? Why did you lie about the fact that you had actually multiple devices, not just one, as you claim? Why is it that you didn't fully disclose the different decisions that were being made by the State Department in regards to very specific government action that just happened to be countries where there had been very generous contributions to the Clinton Foundation? These are questions that I believe she would need to answer even if she wasn't a candidate for president. But for heaven's sakes, if she wants to lead this country, we need to know exactly her entanglements with foreign governments, her entanglements with truth, and whether or not she could be entrusted to sit in the Oval Office.
Mm-hmm. Now, Governor, right now what's on everybody's mind is the murder of Kate Steinle by an illegal immigrant who was deported several times but still is in this country. He took the life of a young woman. And the key question for the next Republican nominee is, if you become president, how are you going to secure the border, and what are you going to do with the illegals here?
Dr. Grace, I would secure the border in less than a year. And if that sounds a little audacious, let me explain. 73 years ago, we built a road between British Columbia and Alaska. Those are tough weather conditions, and we had the limitations of engineering that existed 73 years ago. That was a 1,700-mile road that was built in less than a year. I've simply refused to accept that a country that could do that 73 years ago couldn't take care of securing the border within a year under the technology that we have, without the kind of bad weather conditions that would be evident in a British Columbia to Alaska road. So here's some specific things I'd do in addition to securing the border. I'd issue an executive order that ended the catch and release program that the president that we currently have has engaged in. Secondly, I would deny funding to sanctuary cities. And I would ask Congress to join me in doing the same and simply say, if you're a sanctuary city and you're not going to allow us to enforce law in your city, that we can deny you. The third thing I'd do, I'd declare that drug cartels are terrorist organizations and treat them that way. I'd reverse the executive amnesty program that is illegal, that the president himself on 23 occasions had said that he didn't have the legal authority to do, and then went ahead and did it anyway because he claimed that his pen and phone were somehow magic. And the final thing I'd do is stop immigration courts from undercutting our laws and insist that they no longer would be allowed to ignore and to selectively pick those laws with which they agree.
And what would you do with the folks that are here?
I would be very careful not to try to address that until we secure the border. Here's how I look at it. If the pipe in my kitchen breaks and I got water spewing all over the floor, it's not my first reaction to go to Home Depot and get a new sink. It's my reaction, get the water stopped. And I think before we say, what are we going to do with the 11 million or the 20 million, however many are here, what are we going to do with them? Let's ask ourselves, are we serious about securing the border? And once we do, then the second thing I'd do is I'd work to pass the fair tax, because the quickest way to end illegal immigration is to take the economic advantage out of it. And the fair tax, which is a tax we pay at consumption, would do that, because if under the current system a person is working illegally, they're not paying payroll taxes. It's not coming out of their check. And their employer is not paying any of the payroll taxes. So there is a definite tax advantage to being illegal. But under the fair tax, when you pay at consumption, here's what happens. The illegals pay the same tax as everyone else would be paying. They would get zero benefit out of being illegal. In fact, they would be penalized because the portion of the fair tax that empowers poor people the most, which is the pre-rate that untaxes their basic necessities, only available to citizens. Therefore, if you take the advantage away and make it economically disastrous to be an illegal immigrant, then you've greatly improved the likelihood that people will want to be illegal. They'll want to find out, what does it take to be legal, And they'll do that for their own economic self-interest.
Right. Now, some members of some of your colleagues, some of your fellow contenders have denounced Donald Trump's comments regarding illegal Mexicans, saying that some illegals are murderers and rapists. He's been denounced in some quarters, and some members of the base are rallying to him. What do you think on that, Governor Huckabee? Were his words racist and offensive, or did he simply state obvious facts?
You know, I've been very careful not to comment on the other candidates, and been not very honest in saying Donald Trump doesn't need my help in getting wind underneath his wings or to get publicity. But it's I think very it's very just difficult for me to understand why Republicans would spend our time beating up on other Republicans. Donald Trump has as much right to run as I do or anyone else. He'll make his statements. He'll stand by his statements. And he'll defend them. I'd rather focus on my own plans, and that's what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. But I don't think Donald Trump is a racist, and I think anybody who would say that has never been around him. He's a plain-spoken guy, but I think if you disagree with somebody, calling them a racist is sort of a way to end a legitimate and thoughtful discussion, and that's unfortunate. Republicans have room in our party for Donald Trump, and we should be welcome to hear his views. And if we disagree with him, well, we'll disagree with him.
Right. Now, Governor, in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage, do you fear that there's going to be a wave of persecution coming against Christians who dissent from that? Christian organizations, for example, that say, well, we're not going to practice same-sex marriage. Do you think that we're going to be living soon in an era of Christian persecution? Will we become exiles in our own land?
We already are. And I know that may sound a little bold, but I met a couple in Iowa last week, the Oddguards, who lost their wedding chapel business because they've essentially been run out of business. They've been fined $5,000 because they refused to carry out same-sex weddings. If you talk to Melissa Klein, she and her husband Aaron have lost their cake business in Oregon. They've been fined $135,000 for discrimination because they are Christians and they do not believe that they should participate in making a cake for a same-sex couple. I've never seen a cake that was worth $135,000, but that's how much they've been fined. Well, that'll put them out of business. You see it in a florist in Washington State, Baron L. Stutzman of Arlene's Florist, a photographer in New Mexico at Elaine's Photography, a T-shirt maker in Kentucky who was told that he had to make T-shirts even though they were offensive to him. The list goes on and on. This is just the beginning. Christian schools, universities, hospitals, individual Christian-owned businesses, or for that matter, Muslim or Jewish-owned businesses, will be forced to accept a worldview that their conscience refuses them to accept, meaning they'll have to decide, will they obey God or will they obey the government? And that's a frightening place for an American to be.
Right. Now, you've called for civil disobedience. You've called the Supreme Court. It thinks it's acting like it's the supreme being, and we've got to stand up to that. Now, how far do we practice this civil disobedience?
Well, I think the next president, and I hope it's me because I'm the only one who is saying outright, I'll make it very clear that we've got to get back to the constitutional understanding of three equal branches of government. And the Supreme Court cannot make a law. They can review one, they can rule, but unless the Congress of elected representatives decides to enable that law through legislation, and unless the executive, the president, decides to sign it and enforce it, there is no law in force. And I think Americans need to go back to ninth grade civics, and we need to reflect upon the fact that if you allow the judiciary to act as if they are the supreme branch, in this case, the supreme being, what you've essentially done is surrendered to judicial tyranny. Jefferson spoke out against this, as did Jackson. Abraham Lincoln ignored the court in the Dred Scott decision of 1857, just simply said, I'm not going to enforce it. And I know that may sound stunning to some people, but it really isn't at all. That's the check and balance that was created in the Constitution so that no one branch of government would be able to simply act and force the other two to surrender. And that's what a lot of people have advocated when the Supreme Court has a ruling and they say, well, that's it. That's the law of the land. There's nothing we can do. Well, of course there's something we can do. And it starts with simply making it clear that until the Congress agrees with that decision, we have no intention of following it.
Now, you have also issued out a statement, just switching gears completely, because you're going to, as you're telling us in this interview, you're going to get tough on the border, you're going to get tough on the Supreme Court, and as I understand it, you're going to get tough on ISIS too. You just issued a statement saying that President Obama is really still in denial about the threat we face from ISIS, and in fact, it was the void that he created in Iraq that led to the current crisis that we face there in the Middle East. Governor, what would you do about ISIS? And also tell me, looking back, do you think getting into the Iraq war was a mistake altogether?
Well, the easiest thing in the world is to go back and talk about what we should have or could have done. But presidents don't get to go back in time like Marty McFly and live back to the future. We have to work with the facts we have. So there's no point in speculating, should we have done it? I think the question is, what do we do in light of the situation we're in? And here's what we have to do. America has to have the most formidable, fierce military in the history of mankind so that when we have a threat, whether it's ISIS, Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Iranians, whatever it is, we make it very clear that we plan to push back and destroy that threat to us. And we won't take 10 years doing it. We hopefully won't even take 10 months. It'll be more like a 10-day exercise because the fierceness of our forces would mean that we can absolutely guarantee the outcome of this film. That's how America needs to operate in the world of foreign affairs and foreign policy.
Now, am I hearing boots on the ground here? Is that boots on the ground, American troops on the ground? I've been saying from the start, I've been saying almost a year now, look, we got to send the troops back in, and that's all there is to it.
We have to leave that as an option. We can't leave anything off the table. The mistake this president has made is announcing to the enemy all the things we won't do. I'd be very clear that we're going to announce to you the outcome. We win, you lose. Exactly how we do it and which levels of force we use to get it done, you'll find out when you're on the losing end of it. But we will use whatever it takes. That would include ground forces, but we would do whatever is necessary for Americans to succeed at putting down this threat and making sure that it is no longer a threat to citizens of this country.
Right. And recently, the Defense Secretary, Ash Carter, said, we've trained, check out this big number here of troops to fight in Syria, 60 instead of the 5,500 that we were promised. What is going on?
Well, this president, even when he waves the stick, he doesn't mean it, and everyone knows it. He says there's a red line. There isn't. He says we're going to arm the Kurds. We didn't. He says we're going to train the people who will defend Iraq. We don't. Nobody trusts him. Nobody. Why would they? He's never kept his word, never stood behind one of his threats, and he's put more pressure on Israel to stop building bedrooms for their families in their own neighborhoods than he has on Iran to stop building a nuclear bomb that would blow up half the Middle East and ultimately America. And this is why we need firm, clear, decisive leadership in the White House. And I'm hoping that we'll have it come January of 2017.
Indeed. Now, Governor, one final question. I know you've been so generous with your time. We're a little bit over the time that you had allotted for me, but I'm enjoying the interview. I don't know about you. I can just keep going all day. I have one final question for you, sir. Some folks say, okay, look, Huckabee is charming, he's engaging, he speaks well, and I'm on his wavelength on so many issues. But, on a couple of issues, he flip-flopped. Governor, did you flip-flop on Common Core and on Social Security?
Neither one. On Common Core, what happened was Common Core changed. It originally was a state-controlled standards for two things, and it was standards only, not curriculum. It was for math and language arts, and it was to be controlled by the state so the federal government wouldn't co-opt education policy. Well, the exact opposite happened. The federal government got its fingers all over it, tied it to things like data collection, additional subjects, curriculum, and they totally destroyed what would have been something the states would have had control over. So now I oppose it because it isn't what it was originally sold and intended to be. And Social Security, somebody said, well, I once said that we need to thank Paul Ryan for putting a plan out there, but a plan that I don't necessarily support. Look, what I said was I appreciate someone addressing the problems that clearly exist with the Social Security system that's underfunded. I didn't endorse the specifics of his plan. What I have said very clearly is the government has already lied to us and stolen from us. And the last thing we need to do is to tell people, oh, yeah, you've worked 51 years into a system, you've had your paychecks involuntarily raided by the government for Social Security and Medicare, and now that you've put that money in good faith, involuntarily, the government is going to say, we didn't really mean it, we're going to raise the age at which those benefits start to 75. We're going to take that money away from you because we're now going to means test, and you make too much money. That wasn't the deal people signed up for. And if Congress is intent on ending someone's pension, let it be their own, not some 80-year-old widow who faithfully paid in throughout her working years and was promised that if she did that, that Social Security check would be there waiting on her. I think, Dr. Grace, the last thing Republicans need to be is guilty of pulling the rug out from under working people who in good faith believe that the government would honor their commitments.
Then how would you balance the books if you're not willing to touch such a big entitlement program?
There are two ways. One, grow the economy, because you're never going to get out of the debt we're in unless we significantly and rapidly grow the economy. That's why I support the fair tax, because nothing gooses the economy as abruptly and as dramatically as moving from a tax on our productivity to simply taxing consumption. And one of the reasons the fair tax really does make a difference is because under the current tax system, the only people paying into Social Security and Medicare are the people who work for wages. Well, we know that over the past several years, fewer people get their wealth out of wages. Most of the wealth in this country comes from dividends and from capital gains, from which there is no Social Security or Medicare taxes received. Under the fair tax, all the money that's paid at the point of consumption goes into the general fund. So for the first time, you have a reliable funding stream for these programs in a vastly enhanced economic climate. So it's not going to be something done overnight or in a year or two, but there is a way to grow our way out of the economic mess we're in and get to the place where we're actually able to begin to pay down the debt and to stabilize these programs.
Mm-hmm. Well, Governor, you've been very generous with your time, and I really appreciate it. I was impressed in your speech and when you launched your presidential campaign that you put our veterans first. I used to run a section of the Washington Times which was devoted to the military community. And in this show, unfortunately, we haven't discussed issues regarding veterans, but I hope that in the future you and I can devote perhaps 15 minutes just to discussing all the ills that plague our veterans. You think that that'll be possible, Governor Huckabee?
I would love to do it because I do think it's one of the most underappreciated segments of our entire country. And if anyone deserves the first fruits of our treasury, it's our veterans. So I look forward to coming back and visiting with you about that.
Thank you very much for your time, Governor Huckabee. I want everybody to go to my article, Why Conservatives Should Take a Closer Look at Mike Huckabee. There's so much to discuss. A lot of the issues are also there in the piece. And Governor, it's been such a pleasure. This is Dr. Grace, upholding values that are never, ever going to die.
I can count on to keep me going strong. Yeah, I hold on.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.